All right, well, welcome back, guys. This is going to be episode 4 of the Motley Crew podcast. My name is Mike. We have Dave and RB over here. Once again, Rob for government names, of course. Today's episode is going to be another Buddhist wisdom quote question. And I have it pulled up on my laptop today, so we're going to go ahead and get this started. The quote is, "A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again, but is he peaceful, loving, and fearless? Then he is in truth called wise." Is that the quote we're doing, or are we doing the other one?
This is it.
This is it. All right, so I don't really understand this one, so I'm going to let these guys start it off first, and then we can kind of go from there.
So the way that I interpret this quote is that true wisdom comes from within. You don't necessarily need to understand your limitations, your strengths, your weaknesses, and you need to grow within that framework. You don't necessarily want to have an outside influence on your perception of yourself and how your wisdom is flourishing. So you can certainly have feedback on that, right? But true wisdom, you don't take praise too heavily, and you don't take criticism too heavily. You understand who you are and who you want to be. And in reality, I think that is wisdom.
I'll take it from a little bit of an example or modern standpoint. You look at social media and the way it is now, and then how it kind of dictates our lives. People who spend a lot of time on social media. Say if you're a social media influencer, or you want to be a social media influencer, you're going to have people commenting on what it is that you put out there for public consumption. So I think as humans, what we oftentimes do is we always have the proclivity to go towards the negative aspect of life. You can have all these people praising what it is that you put out there on social media. Oh, this is good. Your content's so great, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And then somebody just comes and says, your content is trash. You're trash. Your opinions are garbage. You should just go somewhere and die. Right? So these types of things, these types of things happen. Yeah. So you have all these positive comments, and then you see that one. And then you say, am I strong enough to overcome that one single comment? Or am I going to perseverate on that comment and then continue to say, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I should just go somewhere and just do something else and not even try this. So it's about not getting too, like Dave said, not getting too high off of your praises or not getting too low off of your criticisms. You've got to stay strong when the wind blows, like the rock, in order to have your foundational wisdom and have your foundational truths to know who it is that you are. And that oftentimes comes with time and a lot of confidence in yourself in what it is that you're doing.
Wow.
It's pretty deep.
I know. This guy came up with this on the fly right now.
This is unbelievable. Where's the pitcher?
Yeah.
Pour that water.
So as I'm looking at this, and I think about this oftentimes, is when I have different problems or questions or conflicts, I oftentimes do bring it to the table because I don't understand, or I don't want my perspective to be the only perspective that I see it from. So when the quote says, "A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again," I would go ahead and argue that if you never talk to anybody or continue to talk and continue to find various perspectives, then you wouldn't know. You really, how could you know that you're wise or unwise if you don't necessarily have a point of reference? And whether or not you're peaceful, loving, and fearless, in truth, I really don't know that unless I go ahead and share it or bring it up to this point. Like, oh, I actually don't get this. Can I hear it? And I have to kind of talk and talk again. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that my point is more correct than your point, but rather I'm just bringing it up. So, or am I looking at this the wrong way then?
Well, actually, you started reading another quote. But
what do you mean?
It does bleed in, I suppose, so we can't talk about that one as well. I don't think we were talking about that quote. We were talking about the other quote.
What do you mean? A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again. But is he peaceful, loving,
we were talking
fearless?
about the one with the stone.
No, I definitely started off with this one.
You did?
Yes.
What was the one with the stone?
Oh boy.
Oh boy! All right. Well, I guess this is a nice transition to our next.
Why don't we could probably just go to
Yo,
the next
cut the
one at
tape,
this
boy.
point.
Cut the tape. Oh my goodness.
He's so
Rob,
wise.
what are you saying?
He's
What?
so wise. He has every Buddhist wisdom
I
quote
know.
already in his head.
Oh,
He's
yo, he could
already
just
figured out
connect it-
what he wants to say, how he wants to say it.
Yeah.
And he
What?
connects them all simultaneously, past, present, and future. This is incredible. No wonder our minds were blown.
Yeah, I don't understand what the hell's going on right
Wow.
now.
What was the other quote, though? What was the other quote?
The other quote that we
Yes.
were going to get to, and I'll
Unbelievable.
say it now,
Yeah.
is even as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, so are the wise unshaken by praise or blame.
Okay.
Yo, Rob, what quote were you answering? Were you answering this
I was
one?
answering that quote because I thought that's what Dave just answered, because he was talking about praise and blame and all that kind of stuff. And I swear that's the first quote that you read. But I
Yo-
could be wrong. We'd have to look back at it.
We're gonna have to check the tape on this
Yo,
one.
I'm,
Because now I'm
pretty much
confused.
certain
because
that I
Dave,
said
you
the
started
first
talking
one.
about praise,
I'm
right?
now
You
confused.
shouldn't get so high off your praise into, because I kind of fed off of what you
I'm-
said.
I'm-
So I thought we were going off the second. I heard the second quote.
I'm confused now.
All right, well, okay. I'll just say that I know for a fact I read the first one.
All right.
That's fine. But
Okay.
we can go on to the second quote here.
Okay.
Okay.
Which is, even as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, so are the wise unshaken by praise or blame.
I definitely went off that quote too.
Yo, what?
Why do you think you did that, Dave?
What are you guys doing?
This
All right, then I guess.
This may be my fault. It's tough to tell. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well.
His
So what do
wisdom-
we do now then?
His wisdom's just rubbing off on me.
Are we just getting starting another one?
I think we could probably talk about both of them because they're both kind of saying similar things.
That's right. I would agree.
I think so. I think if you keep on rolling.
Well, given that you guys answered the second one, I guess I'll answer the second one now. I haven't actually thought about it that much. Or why don't you guys try to answer the first one, which was a man is not called wise because he talks and talks again, but is he peaceful, loving, and fearless? Then he is in truth called wise.
Okay. So I think I
Give me a
figured
second.
out
Let
what
me check something, guys.
I think I figured out what I did here. So I definitely took components, aspects of the second quote, and integrated them into the answer for the first. So again, I think wisdom comes from within, and those traits of what were they? They were being peaceful, being loving, right, and being fearless. So again, if you just talk, you may not necessarily have the introspection to grow as an individual, right? So I think that when you have these traits, they harbor more introspection, which could be considered wisdom, right?
Yeah, I would agree so. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's that old adage as well, right? You should listen more than what you talk. Therefore, you'll learn more, and then you'll become more wise. But there are some people that are just really great at talking. They talk, they influence people, they motivate people to do good things or bad things. And one would argue that these people who are very talkative, they actually have wisdom because other people look to them for advice, for guidance, as opposed to the person that's a little bit more quiet and you don't really know what they're thinking. I think the person that's a little bit more quiet is going to have a more difficult time to rally and motivate people as opposed to the person that's going to be the more talkative.
Yeah, but could we also argue, or could we also put out a statement to say that because we talk so much and we have so many different points, similar to like any other podcast where you're talking to so many people, that you actually get wiser, and arguably you are wiser because you're talking and talking and talking?
But,
or am I taking this too literal right now?
Well, yes and no. I think that it's not the talking that's making you wiser; it's the listening, right? So you're talking, but you're absorbing more than you're talking. So any good interviewer, any good podcast individual or personality, I think if you really, really listen to them interview, they do talk, but they listen probably 70% of the time.
So would you say that maybe the reference of talking and talking is me putting out statements to be heard as opposed to asking questions? Because I'm thinking about talking as in just the action of talking, whether or not I'm putting out statements or questioning. You guys are saying like, hey, somebody's listening, somebody's asking questions. And I would, I agree with you. We just want to make sure that we have the continuity between what we mean definition-wise of what talking is.
Yeah, in this situation, I think we're talking about somebody who talks a lot, because we all know those people who just talk and talk, and most of the stuff that come out of their mouth is just utter nonsense. you're like, what is this conversation right now?
If
What are
only
we talking
Stan
about?
was here right now. If only he was. He would look at me. Oh, I know the look he would look at. Oh. Sam, make sure you watch this episode.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're thinking right now.
And
But anyways, yes.
and then what in marriage, and three of us here are married. Stan's married. Tang, you're not, but you probably had this experience before. What are one of those things that your wife or your significant other says to you all the time? You're not listening to me. You're not listening. You're busy doing this. You're busy doing that. And that's kind of her cue to say, you need to listen to me. Don't talk as much, or stop doing what it is that you're doing. Because when we listen, that's when we learn about the things that are around us, our environment, the people that are around us. So I think, yes, the wisdom definitely does come from that listening to other people. But then you turn around and then you eventually have to become the one that talks in order to guide people along their path, or people that are coming, and give back to other people. You can't just always lead by just silence and example. You've got to actually speak sometimes.
Rob, I don't know what you're talking about. That never happens. She never says. I always listen all the time, every time. Yes, I agree with your statements. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wait, so now that you guys dove into both quotes, I guess I'll dive into the second one, since I didn't actually do it. Even as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, so are the wise unshaken by praise or blame. To be wise it's assuming that if you are wise, that you would be unaffected by either positive or negative complaints or criticisms towards you, because I'm guessing, right? I'm assuming that you have a solid grasp on your own identity, on who you are. And then it's only when you start listening to these outside sources is when you start getting, the doubt, or maybe that you get big-headed or whatnot, right? I would argue and say that if you don't hear any criticism, positive or negative, it's really hard to know whether or not you're wise, or if people just don't care, or like like even if it is if you're unshaken, like as in maybe you just don't know. I don't know. That's kind of what the statement says, because it's always, when we talk about absolutes like this, hey, it's unshaken by the wind. Yeah, it may not shake. Yeah, I may hear things. I may not believe you, or maybe I believe it. But what if I'm still trying to figure out my own identity? Wouldn't that be even more unwise to not listen to the praise or blame? Because sometimes praise is not necessarily a bad thing. It's reinforcing, saying like, hey, this thing is, what you're doing is the right thing. And sometimes blame is saying like, you should take some responsibility, take some accountability for what you're doing, because, you're the one at fault here, type of deal. So when I see this statement, I don't necessarily agree, just because I think it can go either way. To be unshaken by the wind, I mean, whether or not you accept it or not, I think we should at least pay homage to the wind. I think you should get shaped by the wind. Maybe even a little shaken up. I don't know. That's what I think. But I mean, I know you guys kind of put out your points, I think. I don't even remember what your points was, I'm going to be honest. Because you answered the wrong quote I was trying to figure out, and I just don't get it.
Well, yeah. So thank you for that. That might be, again, my fault. But no, in reality, you bring some good points to the table. Being shaped by the wind, I think is important, right? But I think where this is going, in my opinion, is that the true test of knowledge, right, is that you don't need to depend on others, right? Or wisdom rather is that you don't need to depend on others. Wisdom is knowing that you are wise and that you don't need the outside influence, whether it's praise, or the other one was praise or blame. Excuse me. Maybe there's other inputs that we're not considering, right? So there's praise, there's blame, but it doesn't account for a whole other range of knowledge and from outside influence that can help make us wiser, right?
Good.
Well, Dave, you said something there. You're like, hey, knowing is what makes you wise. But haven't we also heard the statement all the time? The more you know, the less you know.
Right, knowing, exactly.
So it actually makes you arguably less wise.
Well, knowing is not knowing what you know and don't know. It's not just knowing everything you know. It's knowing your limitations. It's knowing what you don't know. I mean, the wisest person says, I don't know, right? Yeah, you trust someone the most when you ask them a question and they say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you.
But you could arguably say that the person who doesn't know is also unwise.
I mean, from a literal sense, yes, but they're wise enough to know their limitations, which in itself makes them wiser in the totality of the scheme.
Okay.
Because nobody knows everything, right? Unless you do.
Right.
Do you?
No. Absolutely
maybe
not.
Rob.
Maybe
Rob,
Rob does.
I feel like
the
Rob,
sage over there knows, but not me.
Rob's
Far away.
No, I just got to ask questions. I just don't get it. That's why I asked you guys. Right? Well, Rob, did you have any statements regarding this quote?
I just wanted to talk to the foundational part because you said maybe when you hear some things, you should be a little bit shaken in order to kind of check yourself and what it is that you're thinking. I think when you're younger and you're developing throughout your teenage years, your formative years, and all that kind of stuff, then yes, you should take everything into account. But at a certain point, you've got to be able to stand for something. So there's that old quote, right? You have to stand for something or else you fall for anything. I think that's where that falls into. At a certain point, you have to say that this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and no matter what comes at me, because challenges are always going to come at you, you have to know that you're that solid rock and you have that foundation, and no matter what it is, that you're not going to waver from your position because your position is correct. So I think that takes time, and that takes a lot of learning, and that takes some effort, and then taking the criticisms and the bounce backs and the praises along the way. But then once you build that foundation up to a certain point, then that's where you are. And you want to continue to build on that foundation the way that you gathered the first foundation to begin with. So you have to be able to be solid on certain points and certain things that you believe in and not waver, just like that solid rock.
Isn't that arguably what's kind of giving us our problem now? If we, not necessarily talking about politics, but if somebody's telling you this is what I've seen for my whole life, all this foundation, everything I hear around me is the sky is blue, the sky is blue, the sky is blue, and I go out and observe it and the sky is green for the day, even if my foundation is blue, 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 and I look at the sky being green, at what point do you have to kind of shake up your foundation? Because you said, hey, you got to stand up or stand up for yourself, otherwise you'll fall for anything. But when there's undeniable evidence, there's oftentimes people, even when there's undeniable evidence, that, you know what, I'm sticking to my foundation. So then to your point, Rob, when do we have to, when would you know that you have to realize that your foundation that you might have been built on is actually a really faulty foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. Those types of things happen all the time.
All
right?
the time.
Yeah, when you have your upbringings that aren't socially acceptable, when you have things like sexism, racism, all these types of things.
Sure.
And then when you go on and have further life experiences, then you realize, well, maybe my foundation isn't what I thought it to be. Yes, definitely. In cases where there's undeniable evidence, then yes, you should be able to go back to that and then have the introspection to say, well, maybe I should believe something different based on the set of facts that I'm presented with right now in front of me. But if that's not the case, and these things are just kind of left up to opinion and conjecture and all of these types of things, those types of things shouldn't be able to bounce you off of your solid foundation. That wind shouldn't really bounce that foundational rock that you've built for yourself. Now, sky is blue, sky is green. If you definitely see that it's green, then okay, well, yeah, it's green. You really can't say anything about that. Solid facts. That's the only time that you should really do something like that. Unless a solid fact is right in front of your face, you've got to be able to stand by your foundation. Is it the problem? Is it that the thing that gets us into trouble now? Well, yeah, probably so.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time, we are not on this earth to be monolithic as a species. We're all different people. We're all different people with different viewpoints and different attitudes, genetics, and all these types of things. So you can't get 100% of the people to agree 100% of the time as some sort of a collective. You have to be able to say, okay, yeah, well, there are differences between people, but we can still come together and then appreciate our differences and then still move forward in the same direction, but still have our foundation.
And isn't the ability to move in one direction with different opinions and backgrounds, isn't that wisdom, Mike? Isn't that wisdom? You know, if we all were on the same page consistently and didn't have different opinions, well, then you're setting a one specific standard for wisdom. And I think I go back to Rob saying in his the formative years statement with the foundation, right? I like that. I think that there is one foundation that you will have to stand for, right? And maybe that's not necessarily an objective foundation, but more of maybe it's a moral foundation, maybe it's a just a personal foundation of your own, right? But on top of that foundation comes that knowledge that Rob is speaking of, those differences, and I think that everyone working together towards maybe toward a common goal or maybe toward different goals. I think that's wisdom, understanding that there are differences and how best to navigate them.
Okay, well, I don't really have much more to add to that because I think you guys flushed it out. I think I get the main gist of it. As usual, I'm Mr. Literal over here, and but we also got some confusions on, which quote we're actually trying to break down here. Hopefully this doesn't happen again. Sorry for the confusing episode 4. I think this is episode 4. But unless you guys have some closing points, anything to add on before we close this one out? Rob?
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Super Bowl champions, 2021.
And Toronto Raptors and stuff too, of course. Absolutely. All right. Well, that will be the end of episode 4, Motley Crew podcast. Buddhist wisdom. We'll post this one up. The quotes and whatnot will be on the video. So go ahead and give us a check until the next episode. All right.